thank you so much for staying with us for, I believe, one of the last few panels of the day. And after this, everyone will be guaranteed for a happy hour. And this will be a fun and informative session about defense tech and dual use. I'm Krystal Hu. I cover venture and startups for Reuters News. One of my job is to follow the money and see where it goes in technology. And that's how I found myself in the land of defense tech. I'm very honored today to join by three great defense tech investors, Mike, Paul, and Larsen, who come with very diverse background from leading the DIU and a veteran on Wall Street banks and an Olympic medalist, which is Larsen, who won the Olympic medalist in swimming. So we have a very diverse background of investors, and I know we have a lot of founders sitting in the audience. So we'd love to know a little bit maybe how you guys found your way into defense tech investment and what's most fascinates you in defense tech nowadays.
Well, probably pretty clear from the intro, I found my way here through the Defense Innovation Unit. Most of my career is as a tech executive in Silicon Valley, most recently having run Symantec. So it was a pretty close bridge between running Defense Innovation Unit and then joining my predecessor, Raj Shah, and now at a new venture firm, Shield, that's focused on dual-use defense tech.
And General Catalyst, we're a full-stack venture capital firm. We made our first defense tech investment in 2004. We bought a company, actually control of a company called BBN, which built the Boomerang anti-sniper system. More recently, we lead this thing called Global Resilience, which is our effort to help modernize our most critical societal systems, specifically defense, intel, industrial, and climate. And we're super focused on that for the next couple years.
Hard act to follow here, but I took a little bit of a different path into venture capital, spent my formative years in the military, in the Navy, and got lucky and had some folks take a chance on me up here in Silicon Valley and give me the opportunity to work at their venture firms. And all the while, I was passionate about serving our men and women in uniform and continuing that spirit of service and trying to find a way to invest in it. Fortunately, there was predecessors like In-Q-Tel who showed that that was possible. I know we have some In-Q-Tel folks here. We had DIU 1.0, then 2.0, and now 3.0, Mike says, which I'm looking forward to learning more about. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for veterans to be involved, to further our cause, to help our country and national security. And we have a small fund to do that, similar dual-use mandate to Mike over at Shield. I think we tend to bend a little bit more enterprise first, and if the government market can come around and we can pave the road in front of the companies, we'd be happy to do that. But also see a lot of opportunities for pure play defense companies these days. But the vision needs to be pretty darn big, and I'm looking forward to hearing what these gentlemen think about that.
We're going to start with news and the buzzword of the day, Replicate 3.0. I think it's a new report that was released this week, and I think there is no better person to talk to help us understand the implications for founders in the space than Mike. Can you tell us a little bit your reading into it?
DIU 3.0.
Yeah, DIU 3.0.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen it, Doug Beck, who's the current director of DIU, published this. It's on CNAS's website, so cnas.org if you want to read it. It's about 9 or 10 pages. It basically, and great news, of course, DIU is now reporting back to the Secretary of Defense, which is where it was when Ash Carter formed DIU. I guess I had the lost in the wilderness years working for the R&E organization. I won't take you through some of that. But Doug's vision is that DIU has now shown that we can work with commercial vendors. They can solve military problems, and it's a very competitive process that DIU has pioneered. So now 3.0 is all about how do we apply that to the most difficult strategic problems the military has. That's easier to do when you're reporting to the Secretary on the same staff with the combatant commanders. So he's partnering with INDOPACOM especially, but also EUCOM, given the conflict in Ukraine. And the idea is to see what those combatant commanders need and get that fielded. Replicator, which you just mentioned, is all about how do we get more mass on target, especially in INDOPACOM. How do we get thousands of small, low-cost, attritable, probably unmanned systems that could be very effective to deter or be in a conflict with the PRC. And so that's kind of the first big initiative under DIU 3.0. We'll see, the issue for DIU 3.0 is resources. So Congress hasn't passed a budget. You know, HAC-D says it should be $1 billion. The Senate said, I don't think so. I don't know where the conference is going to be on that, but you can't do anything at DOD without resources. So Doug is scrambling right now to figure out what will the budget be, and then to hire some people. He has gotten approval to add some more people, which he's done. He describes that in the DIU 3.0. But it's a great vision. It really will make DIU have an even greater impact than it's had so far.
Oh,
A
and
bunch of us, signed this letter supporting DIU's budget, right? And I think one thing that gets us excited about the opportunity right now is just the level of engagement, the awareness. I think there's like a defense tech event somewhere in the U.S. once a week or something like that. Indo-PACOM's here next week, meeting with innovators and venture capitalists. And so I think what's really changed, I'm curious, Larsen, what you think. I just feel like awareness of the problem, transparency around the needs has really inflected between the innovation economy and the DoD, to a lesser extent the IC, which is exciting. I think the capital flows, irregardless of whether we get the money for DIU, Mike, the capital flows on the venture side are definitely there. You just raised your new fund. We've got a lot of capital, which is exciting. I think third is just talent, Krystal. I think when we look back over defense tech the last couple of years, you went from a space where Silicon Valley didn't really want to spend time on it or innovate on it, and now it's actually topical. People are engaged in the mission, and you have people choosing to work in this area. It's a little bit like healthcare 5, 6 years ago. You had people who weren't doctors going to work in med tech, healthcare tech. You're seeing the same thing in defense and industrial areas, which is exciting to us.
what do you think is behind that shift of Silicon Valley VCs' appetite in defense tech?
I think it's three things. One is, VCs are kind of like lemmings. They kind of need to see things that work out. It's like the public markets. And so they need to see people create valuable businesses. And I think we owe kind of a business debt of gratitude towards the SpaceXs, the Palantirs, the Andurils who clawed their way into DoD and scaled and show people you can build valuable companies. That's the problem with investors. They got to see a playbook, and that's one reason. I think two, and this is more of a philosophical point, we think the best founders right now want to work on problems that matter. And we see that every day in the people we meet across our portfolio at General Catalyst. People want to work on stuff that makes a difference. And you think about what those things are. It's kind of like, Maslow's hierarchy. You want to be safe. You want to have industrial capability. You want to have food. You want to have health. These are basic things like industrial, defense, energy, and climate. And then lastly is, it's more of a nuanced point, but I think there are many, many ways to scale defense tech in the markets now. It's not just raising $1 billion from a billionaire and building big systems. There are some bottoms-up capabilities. There's PLG-oriented companies. There are people who've been very effective at building subsystems. So again, back to the playbook point, there are many ways to scale that weren't necessarily apparent a few years ago. And again, you gotta, it's hard. It's not easy. We'll talk about it. But I think that's a critical component to the VC side.
Well, I think the other thing is this is happening in a backdrop where DoD realizes what we all know. The technology DoD needs is being developed, not very far from here, either downtown San Francisco, Silicon Valley. There's other innovation hubs, of course, but it's happening in the commercial market. So my former boss, the CTO of the Pentagon, she says there's 14 technologies that are critical for national security. I don't know whether it's 14 or 20, but 11 of the 14 that she named are being developed in the commercial sector, not in government labs, not at DARPA, not at Air Force Research Laboratory. That's a big change if you went back 30, 40 years where most of the technology the military needs, it developed or it helped develop. I mean, let's face it, the military basically developed the silicon industry, right? Created Silicon Valley. That's not the case now. AI, cyber tools, autonomy, what's happening in commercial space? It's not happening in DC or government labs. It's happening in commercial companies. That was Ash Carter's vision back in 2010, saying more and more of what the military needs is going to be developed outside. How do we get access to that? So I think we're now riding some of that trend. Pentagon's not moving fast enough there, but at least people see that that's the direction we need to move.
I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen with the Pentagon not moving fast enough to adopt these things is this concept that a friend of mine labeled to me the other day as fool's gold, where you can get some of these early day contracts through SBIRs and other things, and there's no pathway to a larger scale opportunity in the DoD, nothing that's clear. And that's something that I think can be very dangerous for people that are newer to the space. Fortunately, this defense industry and technology has been selling into government for longer than I've been alive. So this is something that's a well-worn path. So one of the things that encouraged me to get into the space originally was the fact that I thought it was just underappreciated here in Silicon Valley. As DIU 1.0 was standing up, I felt like nobody was truly acknowledging that there was an opportunity, a well-worn path for large-scale technology businesses to sell to government. You see that with AWS got their start in the government. You got CrowdStrike, VMware, you name it, all these big companies that sell into government because they built a technology of consequence that transcends industries. And I think that's what DIU did a great job to help proliferate. But also it's very confusing. And if you have people on your team that don't have the expertise to know what's fool's gold and what's real gold, you can set yourself up for real failure. And you can set yourself up for failure as investors as well. I got introduced to an early stage company the other day by a very well-known and well-respected seed fund. It's like, Larsen, this company's been around 6 months, got $1 million in ARR. It's like, no, they have a SIBR phase 2. That's not $1 million in ARR. And I'm not trying to be pejorative or say that I know more, but I sort of do in this situation very limitedly. And so I think it's really important that we go into these situations eyes wide open. There is tremendous opportunities, but crossing that chasm, that valley of death, whatever you want to call it, is a Herculean effort, and it takes a really unique executive team to be able to do that. And it also takes the urging of the powers that be in Congress and the DoD to push it in the right direction. To Paul's point, I think the talent is really transforming. 6 years ago, there was the Google walkouts. Everyone was, basically a Silicon Valley pacifist, as I would label it. And now people are in droves flocking to DoD to solve these problems. And so I think that just the average talent is leveling up, which is exciting. The pathways are opening up, but I also don't think we should be dismissive of the challenges.
I think the operative word, I think, is patience. I think a lot of the investing money coming in right now, it's obviously there's some sexiness, there's some, excitement around it, but I don't think people fully understand the patience required to win in this space and the lumpiness and just the journey. And so, one of the things we worry a lot about is like you have people not with the right horizon investing in this marketplace. And if it doesn't go well, we're not going to be able to get the capabilities we need to deter ourselves and to keep pace with our adversaries. And that's frankly one of the biggest problems we're scared about. But I do think the talent thing is going to save us. We teach a class at Stanford on national security, and Trey Stevens kicked off our first class, and we made a joke about how 4 or 5 years ago nobody wanted to hang out with Trey Stevens or Palmer Luckey. Like seriously, like they were not cool kids. And after this class, there was a line out the room of people wanting to talk to him at Stanford University, that's about all I'll say about that. But it's just, again, that's why we're so excited. The talent is there. We have the capital, provided it's patient. And you've got, obviously, the strategic imperative you all understand deeply. I think the innovation economy is slowly understanding the strategic imperative that you all, obviously deeply understand.
On the capital inflow, are you seeing some tourist capital or VCs in the space, given how topical?
It's too fresh. I mean, I'm curious to see what you guys think. It's really been like a 12-month phenomenon. I'm really worried about like halfway through this year or later this year, people kind of like, oh, this is taking too long. There's none of these nice up and to the right things. So I think we're still early. That's why I want to spread this message of patience. Like, it's going to take years for some of these things. And patience can be fast too. Right, avoiding the SIBR innovation theater, not getting pulled this way and that way, building the right way. It's just hard. Like this is spaces where the only space in technology I can think of where the user getting product market fit from the user is very, very hard unless you actually served or you have access or somebody. That user doesn't have budget, has no control over the money. That's a whole separate maze. And then third, you got to run a company. And if you're coming from, a military background or a user background, you got to figure that out on the fly. So it's like 3 things you got to do really, really well. And then you got to get some money. Every other sector in technology doesn't have that dynamic, multi-dimensional Rubik's Cube, and that's why it's so hard. You need the patience.
To your comment about the tourist capital, I think fortunately we're in a room of some of the most patriotic people in Silicon Valley that you could possibly ever find. People that have been investing in this space for a long, long time that have the scars to show for it, and literally and figuratively. So I'm really honored to be around friends and colleagues in the audience that should be up here instead of me, frankly. But honestly, I think that I haven't been in venture that long, but I've seen the scooter craze. Everyone did a scooter company, and then everybody did a crypto company, and everyone's doing an AI company, and everyone's doing a defense tech company. So VCs, like myself included, is sort of a lemming. It's just the way it goes. And so it's really hard to counteract that. But I also think that with that, there is amazing companies that come from these waves, and it takes the really independent thought leaders like the Palmers and Treys and General Catalyst to back these guys at the Series A. I remember seeing this, and I won't say specifically where I was at, but I remember firms passing on doing Anduril because it was when Trump was building the border wall, and Anduril was building the virtual sort of like stitching, for lack of a better term. And it was very faux pas, lots of headline risk. People said, we're not doing this. And now guess what? All those firms are in that deal. And so I think it's really fascinating to me to see Silicon Valley as an ecosystem change very quickly, all things considered, in terms of where they're placing their bets, and what was once faux pas is now popular, and people aren't afraid to jump in now.
Well, I will say definitely there's tourist dollars coming here. And I think you're seeing that from some of the generalist firms. So if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm looking for who to go with, I mean, money is money, I think it's really going to be to your benefit to look for people who have some experience with the Rubik's Cube, as you mentioned, because the unique thing about selling to DoD is the end user is separated organizationally from the contracting and separated from the budget. That's a pretty tough place to navigate. And as Larsen said, there's a lot of fool's gold, which means the R&D community is spending a lot of money, but that doesn't lead to ongoing production revenue. So being able to discern the difference is really important. So for all the entrepreneurs in the room, look for a team in your investors who kind of understands that and has some experience with it. You're going to be a lot better off than just somebody who's got a big brand name but really doesn't understand the Defense Department.
Earlier today on the VC panel, where it was a civilian allies panel, they were talking about excuses not to take venture capital. What are businesses like? You should explore starting a business perhaps that doesn't require venture capital. I like to think if I was ever to be good enough to start my own business, that I would actually use some of this fool's gold in my advantage. I don't mean this to be a topic on fool's gold up here today, but you can actually build and bootstrap a business very uniquely in the defense tech sector, more so than other sectors. You can get grants, you can work with DARPA, you can work with a whole lot of other sectors. So I don't mean to be dismissive of it and say that it's not useful. You can actually buy down a lot of risk intelligently before attracting venture capital to make, to give yourself a further, leap ahead in terms of technological progress, and also engagement with the end customer. So I don't want to be totally pejorative about, these opportunities, because there is utility. I just wanted to highlight that you need to make sure you know what's what and treat it for what it is.
Yeah, this is where the patience equals impact, right? So we have a company that'll come out of stealth in 2 months, and to their point, they're very savvy in DoD. They've sourced multiple cyber type things just to hire their first 10 engineers. They know exactly what they're getting into, and they're 2 years into it, total stealth, and they've got customers, but their main business is going to be a dual use industrial software platform. But they monetize that, they deliver great value for the customer, but they knew exactly what they're doing to get off the ground into a level of scale that you wouldn't have otherwise if you just went down the street on Sand Hill Road and diluted yourself 25% on a $10 million valuation.
You're gonna love it when VCs tell you to. You can.
We paid a much higher valuation, but it's great. They're way better set up to succeed, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's fine. And we have a lot of founders in the audience. We'll be curious to know, when you guys evaluate a potential investment, what are you looking for in a team, especially when it's dual use? How, say, will be different from your average SaaS business?
Starts with the people. I mean, that's the most important thing. Shield is investing in early stage, so that means pre-seed, seed, Series A. At that stage, you may not have product market fit yet, or you've got to have the grit to, the first wall you ran into was brick, and so I got to chart a different path. So the general capability of the founding team is really important. We also look for a founding team, not just a solo founder, because anyone who's run a business knows that it takes complementary skills to be successful. So team is the most important thing, and then we're looking for, do you have experience in an area that you're going after? If it's dual use, maybe you have a segment that you're focused on, financial services, healthcare, whatever. Do you have some experience in that, or have you managed to close the gap because you're spending some time understanding what that looks like by talking to lots of customers? So what market you're going after and how well you know that would be next. Then last is the technology. We generally assume people can figure out the technology and execute. We're okay taking that risk. Not ever comfortable taking team risk.
Yeah, I think there's probably three things that really stand out for us when we see things we really like. I think one is, the depth of the problem search on the early stage side, just to focus on the early stage side, the founders have gone through. There's so many problems to be fixed in the DoD and IC. It's not a shortage of problems. It's how do you pick in the journey of picking those problems. And so the best teams we've seen have really put a lot of intentionality and time and gone deep on that, as opposed to their specific thing they saw when they were over here and really canvas, hey, I really want to work in this problem. That's one very tactical thing. I think the second thing is really the thoughtfulness around the go-to-market. This is one where everyone we see, these 5, 10-person teams are looking for these amazing BD unicorns, like the BD person who can sell into the government, understands the mission, is technical, and can, just, be this amazing person. And our experience in defense tech is those people don't exist. And you need to actually be able to bring together a great BD person, a great engineer, a great business operator, which may have different varying backgrounds. If you look at actually the companies who've scaled really nicely, they have that at the initial onset, and they've scaled that culturally within their teams. One of our companies actually doesn't let any sales meeting happen in DC without having 3 separate people in that meeting who represent those 3 functions. They made mistakes early on, but now they require 3 different functional people to be in a sales meeting with a PO. So that sort of mentality, Krystal, is what we've been looking for. And then just on the depth of problem set, it doesn't have to be most exquisite next-gen edge AI stuff. You look across the defense industrial base, we see amazing opportunities in metal bending, in wire harnesses, in making things, in just the industrial base to support the mission, not just the sexy stuff that you can kind of get your hands around from a tactical standpoint or kinetic standpoint.
You guys sit on my investment committee. It sounds like you guys really, know what you're doing. No, in all seriousness, I couldn't really elaborate any further on that. I think it's important also to highlight just the scale and size of the opportunity that you're pursuing. Venture capital is a different business model. Basically, like it or not, and I don't like it, a third of my companies are going to go to zero. Maybe other people have different odds, but that's generally what happens in the venture capital industry. I'm going to have a third that does a 1 to 3x, and I'm going to have a few that do really, really, really well. And so basically, a venture capitalist, generally speaking, is looking for things that have the opportunity to be a 20 or 100x that's going to make up for all those other losses in the portfolio, so they can still deliver 3 to 5x return to their investors. And so with that in mind, I think it's really important to recognize that we're risk-seeking. We're looking for things that, if they work, they could get really, really big. And one of the challenges in the Department of Defense or selling to government or building a defense tech company or a dual-use company is there's so many awesome problems to solve that could definitely solve a problem for the warfighter. I think Hacking for Defense does a great job bringing those things together to highlight those problems. But I think in order for it to really move the needle in a venture fund where you are going to have losses, it needs to be of a strategic enough scale. And so that's one reason I'm really excited to hear about DIU having this 3.0 mission, is because those are the things that I think are truly investable, that for a venture capitalist to get behind and to take the risk of selling to government, to take the risk, because with a defense tech company, you not only have normal startup risks, you not only have team breakup risk, recruiting risk, customer risk, fundraising risk, economic risk, banking collapse risk. You choose it these days. How many more risks do you want? But you also have to deal with budget holders, end users, contracting, Congress. Shit, that's a lot of stuff. And so it better be a big opportunity.
I actually think one misconception in this arena is everyone's focused on program of record and getting in budget, in line. I heard one company we're talking to, they had some investors pass, and I say, what was the feedback? And they said, well, these investors are only doing investments in companies that funded program of records. I'm like, well, there's only 3 companies I know of that have funded program of records in defense tech, so they're obviously not doing a lot. That's like a misnomer. I think that's one misconception. The other misconception, and by the way, like we have a teammate from ours back to Amazon AWS, Teresa Carlson. She sold $10 billion a year in sales to worldwide governments. She had one program of record. So it's out there. You can go get it. I think that's part of the opportunity. But one of the issues with like this power law, kind of hoping you're going to have these moonshot outcomes in defense tech, is that the industry may not be set up that way to have 10 Anduril type outcomes. And I would just encourage you all to think about something that you all know that nobody else down the road here knows. You all know the customer, and you have a heads-up advantage on go-to-market. And one of the things we think a lot about is maybe in this marketplace, it's about acquiring, integrating different products to solve solutions capabilities, and not building some giant, beautiful, huge company, but maybe it's a roll-up to be creative. Maybe it's putting different pieces together. There's a lot of amazing companies like a Danaher, or TransDigm, or a Constellation Software. These are all three $50 billion plus market caps that just rolled up capabilities. Maybe this is a market where if you had 20 different products and you had a great BD team on top, that could be a billion-dollar business, just as valuable as Anduril, just not building an autonomous, XYZ. So I think there's a creativity level. I know Larsen's got a creative idea. We'll come to that in a second. But like where this market may need a different approach to deliver the capability and make some awesome returns. And that's just one thing we think a lot about.
You guys have a front row seat in advising a lot of companies when it comes to selling to the government or working with DIUs. On a practical level, what's the best practice or lessons you have seen your portfolio companies have learned?
Well, for us, we're AI, cyber, autonomy, and space. If you're AI or cyber, our advice is don't make the government your first customer. We have folks come to us that's their vision, but it's much easier for the problems you heard about here, to go to the commercial market and prove your product market fit. You're going to get much faster feedback. You're not waiting on Congress for the budget. So I think for a software company, you want to refine what you're doing first. Then we know the pathways, all three of us here do, to get you effectively selling to the government. If you're autonomy or space, your market probably is government, so you have to be thinking about how to do that smartly. But even there are both commercial opportunities and international opportunities. So better to have a diversified plan there rather than, okay, I'm counting on Space Force. I know they're making a play for a budget and that we're going to get that from Congress in 3 years. That's a very risky proposition. That's why SHIELD is really only investing in dual use, not single use. So Anduril, great company. I hope they're phenomenally successful, but it's not an investment we would take on because in that case, you need a billionaire to fund it and be behind it so that you can wait out the DoD purchasing cycles.
That's saying a lot coming from you. I mean, you ran DIU. You were in charge of acquiring.
I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, this is what you did, and like you're basically explicitly telling us here that you're not going to do anything that's
despite how
subject to
talented
government.
I am, I wasn't able to fix DoD in 4 years. So
You tried.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go, into that firestorm and see if we can pull it off. So we don't care about dual use. I think it's if you have it, great. If it makes sense for your business and if you have the right resource efficiency to pull it off, Godspeed. I think we are super excited about the different kinds of models we've seen to scale in the DoD and IC. So we have seen companies pull off top-down selling to the 4-star, 3 stars, and get to, within 2 years of 2 years of launching a company into a POM cycle, potential program record after 2 years, right? That's one company we're looking at. We have a company called Vanavar, which went from 0 to 50 million in revenue in 3.5 years, bottoms up selling, intelligence analysts dropping $100,000 on a credit card on bottoms up, non-classified software. There's a great company I'd love to invest in called OneBrief. I'm not even in it, but they've been running around to bases around the world and selling $1 million software for ConOps planning. I learned that people do like these crazy PowerPoints with 200 pages of static content. Theirs is an Airtable, and it's a great product. That's a super scale business. We have a company in Europe called Helsing, which is probably the hottest European defense company right now. They got to a program of record in 2 years and 2 months since founding. How did they do that? They said, you know what, we're just going to partner. They convinced Saab to let them build the modern electronic warfare package for the Eurofighter, and got to a program in 2 years and 2 months, because unlike most of the US defense tech startups, they embraced the primes and radically collaborated. I could just go on, and maybe we don't quite scale there, Mike, but I just got to believe there's a way to get dollars, scale these businesses. You know, Turbine One, Ian's here, they've done a great job with training exercises. I had no idea people spent that much money on training. Like $50 million budgets for one training exercise for 6 months. I was like, wow, that's some real money, and a colonel can cut the check on that. So all these things, you know, you find out of getting dollars out of the system, deliver value, and grow over time.
It can be done, it's just higher risk. Yeah.
Larsen, what risk level are you taking there?
I have no idea. We originally did a lot of what Mike was saying. And I think we're now becoming more emboldened to take some more calculated risks that are defense only. We haven't done much of that. We've done some defense first with autonomy and space and stuff like that with a couple of them. But I think that the tailwinds of the talent, which is in this room, the tailwinds of these great big funds and great experience here is in this room. And so I think that gives me cautious optimism that there will be more opportunities, not less, in this space. I do think that we are, somewhere on the Gartner hype curve in the industry. We were down here, now we're on our way up. Are we at the top? I don't know. I think the trough of disillusionment is coming very soon in the industry. I think that we'll be left with sort of the true, missionaries for dual-use defense tech very, very soon, the people that really believe in this, because it's hard. It's not easy. But that's why the warfighters in this room, they know that. They've deployed overseas. They've been into combat environments. They've literally been shot at. They know what it's like to sacrifice for their country. And I think that the sacrifices they're going to be making here in this next incarnation in building technology-enabled businesses is going to be a great thing for our country, but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
I don't know how many founders here are building AI-related startups, but if you have time to add AI to the company name, and apparently that's one of the highlights in the overall, slowing venture funding market. So I'm curious, as defense investors, apparently there's a huge room for AI to be applied in different areas and sectors within defense. Is there any ideas that you guys are particularly interested in?
So almost half our portfolio at Shield is AI related, but it's not generative AI. When you talk about AI these days, everybody immediately thinks about large language models, which are truly incredible. But there's still a lot of opportunity in some of the other spaces of AI. So an investment we just made is a company, Unstructured. They're taking unstructured data, unsexy spreadsheets, PDFs. How do I take that data and make it available for AI ML algorithms to work? So that's a picks and shovels kind of play in AI. There's another company, Nexla, that we invested in. How do I make enterprise data available that I've generated from one application to all my applications? So another picks and shovels play. And then we're looking at what used to not even be called AI, but now people are saying I'm using AI involved in it, which is how do I take huge amounts of data and get information from that. That used to be called big data analytics. Now that those companies have a .ai. So less about large language models and more about all of the technologies that are now part of the AI ecosystem that help us get signal from noise. There's a huge number of opportunities in AI still that go beyond LLMs.
Yeah, so if you're going to invest in LLM foundational models, for sure, that's a big, exciting category. The way we think about AI at General Catalyst is like, how is it going to transform each of the existing software categories in enterprise AI for that team? And so in defense tech, what do? We look at our framework for defense tech and how does AI transform each of those buckets. And so we think about 6 buckets in defense tech. We think about, at the base level, the operational capabilities for the DoD. That's like logistics, training, communications. How are those buckets going to get transformed by AI? Then you have actual land, sea, air capability. That's obviously being transformed by AI. Anderl, Helsing, et al. Then you have cyber warfare next up. How is AI going to transform that? Then next up you have space warfare. And then you have economic warfare, which is including supply chain stuff. And then the topmost layer would be information warfare, misinformation, irregular warfare. So you think about that stack of capability, how does AI change, transform each of those buckets? And then we think that in each of those buckets, you're going to have multiple big companies, and they're all going to have to leverage AI somehow, Krystal.
Yeah, if you think about it, AI is transforming every other technology. They used to think about cyber a little bit separately as an example, or space and sensors. AI is changing all of those technologies.
With the exception like the data sets and the information is in this marketplace is very distinct. And so one of the things we think about, AI, where do you create the most value? Like outside of these big consumer opportunities is like in bulwarked, like, separate silos, so industrial, healthcare. We have an AI company in healthcare, in defense, where the data is naturally segregated from broader use. And that's how you can really take stuff from the open source markets and apply them for real value in these markets. And you have a bit of a moat there, if you will.
Government still hasn't at scale adopted the cloud or many cloud-hosted software solutions. So I think we're going to have a little bit of time until we adopt AI at a meaningful scale for risk, compliance, security reasons. Unfortunately, in this sector, I think that we're a laggard. I think that we think about risk differently in the department than perhaps we should. I think that there's risk in not adopting. There's risk in not doing anything because other people have different or no rules. And we have been encumbered for a very long time with a bureaucracy that holds us up from maximum effectiveness. And we hold ourselves back because any small failure is viewed as a failure and it's not accepted. So it needs to be perfect. I don't think that's American. I think what's American is taking bold, calculated risks to do something special. And I think we've lost sight of that in the military. And I think we need to change that. And I think it's incumbent on everyone here to do that.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on Larsen's point, the bureaucracy and institutional delay of getting new technology to warfighters means the risk we're taking is giving warfighters second or third best. It's unacceptable. That's why, as hard as it is, we have to keep fighting to make sure that we become more efficient and the priority becomes on speed and getting the latest technology to warfighters. The warfighters shouldn't be we shouldn't be asking men and women to take that risk. That's what motivates me and makes me pretty frustrated about the system we have. We have to be working on changing that.
You mentioned the lack of resources when you were, leading the DIU unit. Is that a budget issue? Is that where maybe the resources are being misplaced, or just some miscommunications between different agencies and departments?
Yeah, it's really both resources in budget and it's people resources. Everyone here knows one of the most difficult things to do is get the detailers to get people to move. The whole admin side of the Pentagon is so broken. It's pencil and paper like we're in the 1950s. And that's just one example of trying to get folks there. One Rhodes Scholar, PhD in computer science from Stanford, who wanted to come work at DIU, it took us 7 months after we selected him to do the paperwork just to get the offer letter. That would happen in 24 hours in any company I worked for before DOD. It's that kind of ridiculous thing that has to be fixed so that we can get the right talent to work on this. Then there's also the budgeting issue. Everybody sees that with Congress. As we mentioned before, DIU's caught in this game now where HAC-D said you need $1 billion, the Senate said you don't need any. It's that kind of institutional delay that keeps DIU from having the resources to have more impact.
The only other industry as messed up as this one is probably healthcare. And so healthcare, $1 trillion market, outcomes don't match the inputs, and it's obviously very complicated. And so, at General Catalyst is actually one of our biggest focus areas. We actually think we can reduce the cost of healthcare by $250 billion by 2030, 25%, and have better outcomes, better service, better economics. And to that end, we've done 130 healthcare tech investments in the last 5 years. And then to top it off, we decided to buy a healthcare system 2 weeks ago with our own capital, not our investors' money, at General Catalyst, because we just figured if we have to transform the system, like what Mike is saying, we have to do it ourselves and show the blueprint. So that's what we call audacity of ambition. The question is, in defense tech, what would be audaciously ambitious? And I'm going to give you this credit, Larsen. You said, what if you cut the budget of DoD by 25%? $250 billion goes away. What would you do? Well, I think there'd be a lot of innovation happening quickly, but again, that's just a crazy idea. I'm giving you full credit because it's so audacious.
I'm in.
How would you build capability faster if you lost $250 billion? You got to go with tech. You got to go with innovation. You got to go with speed.
So you're advocating basically maybe we don't need more budget to some extent.
Well, I'm going to disagree wholeheartedly with that. But I get the point, and it's right. If you're forced to work with less, you have to be more innovative.
Yeah, I have a hard time thinking that we need a defense budget that's the largest we've ever passed when we have no wars that we are actively, overtly involved in. And so I think that's something that I structurally challenge with. You know, like many people here, deployed to the sandbox. I've been involved in it. I get it. But I also know the layers of bureaucracy between the warfighter and the people that make the decisions, and I know the unintended rosy-colored situation reports that justify the ongoing bureaucracy without the actual ground truth. And so I think that we can do more with less. I don't think that we need to, deepen our swamp of spending in order to innovate. I think that we can actually innovate with less and do so more efficiently.
So I have to disagree very strongly with this.
I'm glad.
We're spending the lowest amount on defense that we've spent in the last 40, 50 years. So 3% roughly of GDP. The Cold War was twice that, and we're facing a more dangerous world. We had a nice peace dividend. We thought we were on vacation when the unipolar moment, the Soviet Union had collapsed. China was a fraction of what they are today. And now it's a very dangerous world. We've already seen it. We're now involved in the Middle East. We were trying to get out of conflict in the Middle East. Putin makes a disastrous move in Ukraine. We'll see. He still thinks he can win if we give up the fight. And Xi has said he's marching into Taiwan. $2.3 trillion of economic loss if we lose access to the chips that are made in Taiwan. It's a global depression that makes COVID look like it was a walk in the park. So it's an incredibly dangerous world, and the only way we're going to deter more conflict is by having a strong military. It goes back to what Reagan said, peace through strength.
That makes sense. I agree with you on that point. I just don't think that we do it with legacy systems where we're paying more in operations and maintenance for a B-52, from literally 1952, than we do from a modern, military technology-enabled force that can prevent humans from going in harm's way and credibly deter our adversaries. And I think we can do that much more efficiently than we currently are.
Yeah, we don't disagree.
Totally behind you on that, Larsen.
Yeah, we wrote a piece called Vacation from History in Harvard Business Review that the changing world order requires innovators to change because we've had a vacation from history for the last 30 plus years, as most of us have frankly been alive, of all the bad stuff that happens. My point, less about the soundbite, Mike, is like there are innovations happening that can deliver 10x performance capabilities at 1/10 the cost across this entire defense industrial base, from making chips to missile capability to all this stuff, right? And that's just not getting scaled up in the way in which we think it could be to, have the soundbite of reducing costs and improving capability. That's all. Because we see it all the time. All these companies can do 10x better capabilities at 1/10 the cost at 5x the speed. They're just not getting the shot. That's all.
Yeah, and
as much as I'm a huge proponent of the innovation that's happening in our tech community, it's my whole professional life, it's not all that we need to go to war. And Ukraine is showing us that. We've got the strangest mix of World War I tactics combined with what's happening with drones and a communication system for the country built on Starlink. But you still need that hardware. I can't believe I'm the one making this argument, but we need jets, we need tanks, and we need missiles. We'll be out of ammo if she moves on time. We'll be out of ammo in 2 weeks. Do you think she's not planning on a longer campaign than that? We know he is, and we know he sees that Jake Sullivan is spending his time calling around the world for 155 millimeter shells. You know,
That's like, so hopefully this is spicy enough, Krystal, but like Helsing, back to pick on Helsing, the European AI defense company, their whole thesis is 70% of the assets in conflict are on the battlefield today. They're not going to wait for loyal wingman. They're not going to wait for AI robots. They are going to retrofit and modernize everything they have and convince the European primes to help to let them in to do that, starting with the Eurofighter, moving to a tank, moving to a plane and a boat. That's what in my mind, that's how we get there. It's the same, even more urgency. Like we're operating in our minds at General Catalyst like under like a 5-year window to get to the capabilities. And you got to have this radical collaboration to do that. Like someone has to say, hey, we're not going to build this next-gen AI software for electronic warfare for the jet. We agree, we can't build it. We're Saab, we can't build it. Here's a team that can build it, you can have it. That is a concession that you don't see US primes making.
so we're talking about how we spend the money, but I think no matter how you think about it, in a more dangerous world, we actually need to be spending more. We're not going to be able to get the more for less that we'd all like to see in the time frame to meet these threats.
Just a quick reminder for the rooms that I think we'll be opening to questions after this, and we
Join the heat.
Good luck.
come to
No. Larsen hasn't given his big idea. We were still
I'm not giving my
Larsen's
big idea.
On both sides
I'm not
of the
spoiling my idea, but maybe later. So I would say, show me the incentive and I'll show you the behavior. And I think with traditional government contracting, we are beholden to cost-plus contracting, which incentivizes slow production and high contract values so that you can extract a 10% margin, whatever the margin is, 7, 10+% on just a higher dollar figure. And so, obviously, if I'm a defense prime, I'm going to max that out. I'm going to go for the maximum amount. And similarly, if I know that the government has $500 million to spend, and I'm a private company, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going for 499.9 whatever million bucks. So I think that there is some incentives that we can adjust in terms of how we do this at a large scale that would provide the right behavior for innovation. And to Paul's point and to Mike's point as well, we have these 10x capabilities. Obviously, we need tanks, bombs, bullets, planes, but I think that there are these leap ahead technologies, and we have capabilities that are 10x faster, 10x cheaper, 10x more resilient than what we currently have under our current structure, and I think that needs some improvement.
Completely agree with you there also, yeah.
Yeah, on that note, I think we have got some questions from our great audience.
Larsen, earlier you listed off the list of risks, right? So I'm going to add one about regulatory risk, and particularly with dual use. So if you're a commercial company and you're selling to both commercial and defense customers, then you're probably creating a product that is not subject to ITAR or CCL, and therefore you can access the global TAM, right? So that should be appealing to investors. But a lot of the technologies, like as the U.S. Department of Defense absorbs more of these, how do you guys see the risk that at some point they're going to say, well, wait a minute, this thing ended up being so important to us that we actually don't want you to sell it elsewhere in the world, and we're going to write a law or a policy that's going to short or close off your market, and how should founders entering the space be thinking about that, and how do you think about that as investors?
I guess it was directed to me, so I'll try and take it. I think Mike's much smarter than me on these things. I think that there are many companies that have solved this problem over time, that have solved ITAR compliance and are successfully selling to our allies around the world. I don't think it's something for us that would hold us back from doing a deal that we thought was truly game-changing if we felt like the team was special enough to put the right people around the table to solve that. I think a lot of the problems, one of the frustrations I had here in Silicon Valley is that I'd see founders that were so bold in their vision of creating a new technology and creating a new market for that technology. but they weren't bold enough to go after an existing market opportunity where you can research the budget and where it's going. Like, so to me, there was a little bit of a disconnect there, and I still think there is. And I think in the ITAR part of this, I'm not an ITAR expert, don't hold me liable for this, but I know that there are a lot of people that are, and I'm confident that with a big enough vision, it's still investable and it's definitely navigable.
And Paul, you guys invest in European companies. Is that something you have to take considerations when you invest in foreign companies?
We think each country needs its own resilient capabilities. So we have an Indian aerospace defense company. We have obviously European stuff, and so that's not something we actually, not to digress, but like we actually looking at the reverse. How do we help foreign companies sell better into the U.S. DoD, which has always been a huge friction point? And so, one of the give Steve Bauscher this credit. Ask Steve Bauscher, what could be the coolest thing General Catalyst could do for you at In-Q-Tel and your customers? And he said, create a way for us to buy Israeli, European tech. You figured that out, and so that's something we're thinking about as well.
Yeah, it wouldn't prevent us from investing, and I think your question speaks to the need for urgent reform, reducing the Buy American. That's not helping us. We need to think about the conflicts in the world as not uniquely borne by us, but how are we sharing those among allies? AUKUS kind of points the way, but you wouldn't believe how complex it is to actually develop a program with Australia or the UK, our closest allies. Right now, DoD is trying to negotiate a data sharing agreement to actually share data with those close allies. I mean, we should have, World War II, we were sharing technology, people, projects. Very important to us what was going on at Bletchley Park as an example. We need that model today, and we need to reform ITAR. ITAR is from an era when we own all the new technology in the world. That ain't the case. Wake up. So that has to be reformed so that we can collaborate with allies freely and be selling things. Yeah, we don't want to sell that to the PLA or to Putin, but we got to be sharing that freely. So that really needs reform right now.
Thank you.
Mark Wolf, this question's around supply chain manufacturing. It may be an extension of the conversation we were having previously. Talked about the industrial base's role in national security, but also, having innovation in technology to help drive how goods and supplies are manufactured. But what I haven't heard come up in a lot of conversations is real estate. Much of our supply chains, critical or otherwise, are overseas in places like China. But there's a need to secure them and to bring them home, whether that be here or another more favorable nation. But to do that, we need the real estate. So how do you see the real estate community playing an active role in national security, keeping up the venture community and the government's role in being an enabler in any opportunities that you might see because of that?
Go ahead, haven't thought much about that.
I'm a tech investor, so I'm sort of in the deep end, but I sense some hesitance, so I'll take a shot. I think real estate does play an important role. I mean, with China buying our farmland outside of our bases, I mean, this is obviously an issue. We can't let things like that happen, here. But I think that from a supply chain standpoint, new company standpoint, like this topic of onshoring is a real thing. And I think it's important for our most critical components that we work not only domestically and with our allies. I'm unsure, how that intersects with real estate, to be honest, in terms of how they can, that community can work better with the technology community. But I'm open to ideas from.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about de-globalization. We like to think in terms of re-globalization, and so I think part of this new world is going to be who are your new allies? How can you create more resilience manufacturing? And so we not to pick on one of our companies called J Aerospace, JEH, it's a Indian marketplace for sourcing A&D components from manufacturers that have been working with Boeing and Lockheed for years. And it's technology enabled, and we've got the guy from Boeing's F-15 program running it. Yes, the stuff is made in India, but how else are we going to scale and source that stuff, right? And so we think about, we have a U.S. startup doing wire harnesses in the U.S. They're going to need a lot of space. They need a lot of capability. I think Jeff Wilkie, he's got this really big startup they're building. I think it's called Build, right? And they're building industrial manufacturing capability in the U.S. So we absolutely think of the industrial base, innovation. It's going to need real estate, but I would just extend the horizon towards the re-globalization effect around our allies and how do we have that when we just don't have enough people and land at the right cost structure.
Thank you.
My name is Ben. I work with Cuba Capital. We do a lot of early stage defense investing. One of my favorite military philosophers is John Boyd, and he has a saying that technology doesn't win wars, people do, and they use their minds to do so. I think one of the things that defense tech investors have overlooked, maybe because they're focused on technology, is that the will to fight and win in society is the thing that's actually going to beat whatever adversary you come against. We can have all the F-35s, all the carriers of the world, because I want the American people don't believe that we should fight this war. It doesn't matter. Paul, you mentioned at the top of the stack of the defense stack is misinformation and the societal piece. Can you talk about the people piece and the societal piece that defense tech investors should look at if they truly care about the broader national security picture?
Sorry, can you repeat the question part?
Yeah, can you talk more about the societal misinformation piece and what defense tech investors can do to affect that part of the chain that changes the societal view of whether we should fight or not, i.e. TikTok or other things?
Yeah, so, I mean, you guys probably know about this. Like, we've looked at lots of these misinformation companies, right? I mean, the amount of, like, misinformation that's being pushed across social media channels and online content is kind of scary. And so there's lots of interesting companies doing work in there. Vanavar Labs, what you talked about before, they actually run analytics across, our adversaries' social media to figure out what's going on over there. And so I think that is an important thing to control the narrative. I think that's a whole different warfare battle. I think you were really basically back to the John Boyd point, around the people, right? And I think, people have to operate, inside the OODA loop and go faster, per John Boyd. And so we think technology is going to be enabling those people to do things. I would just make my societal point is what we really hope happens is that people, more specific, the innovation economy understands the threats and the reality of the environment we're in, and we all kind of can work on this together. I talked about the excitement we see in terms of founders choosing to work in this space. That's exciting. For those of you all here who've been, on the leading frontier, I think it's exciting to see new allies and new friends coming in. But, I think the awareness is just not there yet in Silicon Valley. Even with all the defense tech stuff, even all the business, it's just not there yet. And once it does, we'll win. But we just got to get that awareness up.
I'll hop on there real quick, Ben. I think it's a very important question, and maybe more important than anything we've talked about thus far. I mean, look at our military recruitment statistics. People don't feel the calling to serve like they did. But I'd also ask the question, what's our mission? What's our commander's intent? I don't know the answer to that either. So really hard to, rally people to serve if you don't know what the mission is. It's something that's a hang-up with me, and I think about a lot. Would I encourage my children to serve like I did and my father and my grandfather before him? I'm not sure. I don't know how to solve that.
We got 5 minutes left, so we're going to speed up a little bit here.
Hello, panel. This is Jin Song from Genesis Code, and we develop software to accelerate data transmission over the internet. So my question is, for some dual use technology, how to prioritize between go-to-market to defense industry or to the commercial industry? I know in the past, even Mike and Paul have a different opinion regarding go-to-market path. And for startup, we have a limited resource, right? It's not unlimited. We can go both markets simultaneously. So can you give us more insight regarding the prioritization process?
Larsen, you want to take that one?
Who's willing to pay you the fastest? I think that's it.
Where do you have the most capability?
Yeah, I mean, trust your customer to a certain extent. I mean, at the end of the day, all businesses are sort of simple. You build something and try and sell it for a lot of money. And so who's willing to give you that money as fast as possible? If it's the government, then maybe that's your answer. And if it's the commercial sector, I think that's your answer. Maybe I'm too simple, but.
Well, I would just add to that, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the commercial market that's willing to go faster. So I agree with what Larsen and Paul said, but most of the time, you should be thinking about how do I make sure I've got the product market fit, getting my costs down the curve, and improving myself in the commercial market, if that's possible. Then you're going to have a successful business where government is an expansion to what you're doing rather than I'm solely reliant on DOD and Congress.
So in summary, like follow the money, right?
What we go?
Follow the money.
Follow the money.
Follow the
yeah.
money.
That's usually pretty good maxim.
Yeah.
Charles Masters Rodriguez, founder and CEO of MK3 Industries. So we're actually, right now we're working on a automotive supply chain MVP for the commercial side. And I know how I'm going to get our first users and first feedback. Feedback is going to be our first suppliers. But on the dual use side and on the defense tech side, it's almost like the chicken before the egg. Like, how do we get our first users and how do we get that necessary feedback to continue building for them?
So how do you break into the defense market?
Yes, sir.
So you really have to sit and think through, maybe with some people like my colleagues here or others who understand a little bit about the Defense Department, where would those users be and where would the budget be? As we've said, sometimes that's two different places, so that you can then figure out how can I insert myself where there's already a need that's shown. One thing I say, Paul's heard me say this before, selling cool tech to the Pentagon, that is a waste of time. If there's not already a need that's identified and users who care about what you're solving, you're really not going to be successful. So you have to see who's identified what you have as a solution, that's a problem they're trying to solve. If so, hopefully they have budget attached to it. That's where you want to go in. You could spend your whole life talking to generals and admirals, and if you're not talking to the people who have the program responsibility, the contracting authority, you're just having conversation.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Hi there, Paul. I was excited to hear you bring up health assurance. I've read that health assurance thesis General Catalyst put out, and I think everyone in the room should do so, because it's sort of the same problem facing defense tech, where you identify there's an opportunity to create a lot of value, but there's no way under the current system to capture that value. Sounds like the exact same situation we're seeing in dual-use tech. My question for you is, what is it that drove General Catalyst to go all in, to put so much effort, money, and backing behind this idea to change the system in healthcare, and what would it take to do the same thing in defense?
Yeah, thanks for that. What's your name?
Jack Ogden.
Thanks, Jack. So, we at GC, like 6-7 years ago, we were like, hey, we got to go fix healthcare, but it's going to be really, really hard. We had tried before earlier in the days, market wasn't quite ready, and we had a company. This is going to sound like lemmings, but trust me, it's better than that. We had a company called Livongo, which was a diabetes tech company that we started ourselves and helps reduce the cost of diabetic care at no cost to the customer and a better experience for patients, sort of like a diabetes monitor attached to your iPhone. It turned out to be, the biggest healthcare tech exit of all time and was a huge win. But during the building of that company, we realized there should be 1,000 Livongos. And to do that, we realized you had to have 4 things to transform a huge messed up system like healthcare. One was you had to have a lot of money and a lot of companies operating as a system. There wasn't going to be one Amazon to change healthcare, one Walmart. We had to think systematically and put a lot of chips on the table. That's where the 150 chips have come down. 2, you had to have a longer duration. 3, you had to have radical collaboration with the existing ecosystem. Everybody in healthcare tech up until that point wanted to kill the health systems. They wanted to go innovate, disrupt. And we said we got to do it in partnership. This is before we bought the health system a couple weeks ago. So we went and partnered with 20 health systems slowly to learn the culture, learn the words, walk the halls, learn about the businesses, because most VCs don't have the humility and the ego to slowly learn these things. We tried our best to have that. And then lastly was creativity of approach. We had to start 5 of our own companies. We had to buy some companies. We had to roll up some companies. So when we think about, and Craig, you've heard my speech on defense tech. In defense tech, we think, I don't have the answers, but if you do, please let us know. We think you're going to need a lot of money. We got that. You got to have a longer window. We talked about that. You got to have radical collaboration with DC, primes, governments, and incumbents. And you got to be super creative. You got to start companies, you got to buy companies, you got to merge companies. Maybe you just got to be super creative. You know, the roll-up thing we talked about. We think that's the playbook. That's worked so far in healthcare. Maybe we have to buy a prime. I don't know, something crazy like that. But again, that's the playbook that we've been trying to deploy here in defense tech, based on healthcare tech.
General Catalyst buys RTX. You heard it here first.
Last question.
Hello, thank you all so much for sharing your opinions and thoughts with us. I'm Cindy Brothers with Duality Systems. We're a dual-use company that creates AI-optimized and automated scheduling solutions for complex industries and organizations. Sadly, that is healthcare and the DoD. So I'm wondering if you might be able to share with us your cautionary tales of the biggest things that you have seen sink dual-use companies.
I've had a few, this is something VCs don't really talk about a lot because everyone likes to come up here and like beat their chest about their winners. You know, it's the way it goes. But yeah, I've lost all our money on various companies. And specifically, I think, you know, in part because of this, where I think companies were, and myself included, were guilty of being miscalibrated in terms of the opportunity, the timeliness of it, and really put all our eggs in the defense basket. It was sort of crazy for me to think that I want to go back and do some defense-only deals, but I think there's, you know, I think there's some opportunity there. So I think it really does come down to, you know, matching your cash burn with the opportunity set and having a diversified set of opportunities where you're not eggs all in one basket and getting one program. And then guess what? You know, the program, the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, somebody else wins it, there's a continuing resolution, any number of issues, and, you know, and you have investors perhaps without the patience or the wherewithal to continue to do it. And that's happened to me a few times.